So the USDA defines specialty crops as fruits and vegetables, tree nuts, dried fruits, horticulture plants, and nursery crops, including floriculture. Eligible plants must be cultivated or managed and used by people, farmed, for food, medicinal purposes, and aesthetic gratification to be considered specialty crops. Processed products are eligible for the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program, but those products need to consist of greater than 50% of specialty crop as ingredient by weight, exclusive of water. That is a link that you can access from the DATCP webpage, but that is a USDA webpage for the Specialty Crop Block Grant. Right there on that page, there is reference and a really comprehensive list of all the eligible and ineligible crops. So what are not specialty crops? USDA kind of has a few groupings of ineligible crops: oilseed crops, field and grain crops, forage crops, and fiber crops. So some crops have eligible uses and ineligible uses, but are still listed as ineligible. I'm just going to highlight a few of those. Those include sunflower, hemp, peanut, amaranth, rice, oats, wheats, rye, all those food grade grains, sugar beets, flaxseed. There's more. Like I said, you can access that list on the USDA website. So the purpose of the Specialty Crop Block Grant is to enhance the competitiveness of Wisconsin's specialty crop industries. So that whenever you are thinking about your project, no matter what you're doing, the ultimate goal is to always say, how is this project enhancing the competitiveness of the Wisconsin specialty crop industry for your particular crop or whichever crops that you're talking about? Funding priorities, those are going to be listed in the RFP. These are very common funding priorities that don't change from year to year. So funding amounts, minimum projects, $10,000, maximum is $100,000. You can request anywhere in between that. Eligibility, projects, like I said, must enhance the competitiveness of Wisconsin grown specialty crops. And important to note that projects cannot benefit a single organization or institution or individual or business. And a priority for each project, there has to be some component of the project work plan that includes dissemination of project results. So sharing what you found. Those results could be failures. Those results could be successes. Whatever you learned in your project, you need to come up with some way that you share those out with the appropriate and relevant specialty crop industry stakeholders. And so the who can apply, it's pretty broad. It could be a nonprofit or a for-profit business, university, or even local, state, and federal government applicants. This year's grant timeline, proposals are due in a few weeks, February 27th at 5 p.m. We will be reviewing grant proposals. And then once those funding suggestions, those have been made, those get sent to USDA. USDA reviews what our recommendations are, and then may or may not have any follow-up questions. So sometimes there's a little bit of back and forth with potentially funded projects. But once that's all done, contracts are signed and projects can begin in October, November Usually November 1st but it can sometimes be a little bit earlier of this year. And then projects can go through June 30th, 2027, but that's not a requirement. You could end your project sooner if you so choose. So writing your proposal, some important concepts to remember. Make sure that your project need, the justification for being funded is relevant and critical. Think about that and how it relates to the Wisconsin specialty crop industry that that you're writing about. Try to really flesh that piece out. The impact of your project, it must, like I said, it must benefit more than just the applicant. So the greater the results are shared and the more that other Wisconsin specialty crop producers or markets or consumers can benefit, the better, the stronger your proposal will be. So if your impact is kind of small or maybe extremely local, try to think about ways that you can enhance or amplify it. Some common example could be that you partner with someone that you host a field day where people from outside of your immediate area come to learn about what you've done for the specialty crop block grant. It could be that you have outreach materials. It could be that you partner with an organization that does education and outreach, and then they take on that piece. So if you are a business or a farm and you don't want to, or you don't feel comfortable with some of that, then maybe find that partner who is better at that. And then they can help you get that message out about the lessons learned, some things that maybe you pass on to other specialty crop farmers or businesses, so that the Wisconsin specialty crop industry can be stronger and enhanced and better. So I just told you to try to think big and make sure that your project is not too small, but don't overclaim what you are going to do in your project. Don't make it so large. Don't say that you're going to solve every problem. If doing so makes the project sound like it's not feasible, then I think reviewers are gonna have a hard time saying, "Oh, we should fund this project." So make sure that your project can sound achievable. And a lot of times you might say, "Oh, I need to improve my farm," or "I need to improve my business." Well, sometimes that's just too much to kind of turn into a succinct and clear grant proposal. Sometimes you take a specific aspect of your farm or a specific question or concern, and then just focus in on that so that it's easy for reviewers to understand what it is that you're proposing to tackle and what are you going to try to figure out and what you're going to try to accomplish, as opposed to saying you're going to do a lot of different things. Another thing to consideration is, has this been done before? If so, well, why should your project get funded? Be able to articulate that. Is it just that it's been done before in a different part of the country or different part of Wisconsin? And so be able to talk about why this needs to be funded in your area, or it's been done before, but in a different way, or you need to be able to try to make your project stand out and be unique. And if it's something that has been done before in a lot of different ways, maybe a grant is not your best avenue for getting this, venture funded. Maybe it's something that you think about alone. So just think about that. If you can talk about how you're trying to figure something out and trying to expand or be innovative or come up with some new idea that you're going to be testing out or exploring or researching or developing, and that whatever you find out, you're going to share with the rest of the Wisconsin, specialty crop stakeholders and industry. And I think that you're going to have a easier job of putting together a more strong competitive proposal. Some things to avoid: small scale pilot projects. This is more targeted towards implementing something, expanding something, growing your business, not for something that is completely new or a pilot, small scale pilot project. And that includes feasibility studies, website or social media campaigns, projects with too much budget benefiting a single entity or private entity. So again, this needs to benefit more than just you. And if it comes off as I need money for my own business or my own farm, then I think that's going to raise questions during the review process. The online application can be found at the DATCP Specialty Crop Block Grant website, and I think we could probably put that link into the chat, but hopefully you all are able to Google that or have been to the website already. Applications must be submitted by 5 p.m. on February 27th, and applications should not exceed 10 pages. That does not include letters of support, and that application is accessible and downloadable at the DATCP website. We'll walk through that here shortly. So the cover page, that's a part of your application 10-page. That's the first sheet of the application that you download. It's going to ask you to put in your contact information. Previous years, it asked for your DUNS number. That's now switched to the UEI, Unique Entity ID. So the UEI number is something that you register for on sam.gov. It's always free. If anyone ever asks you to pay for getting your UEI, then don't do it. And there are potential companies out there that are trying to trick you or scam you into paying for getting a UEI. It's a free process with sam.gov. And there's some other information there that you're going to fill in on this application cover page. I think it's all pretty straightforward. Project summary. This is going to be a one-sentence description of your project. This is the who, what, and how. This is intended to be for public information, so trying to make this something that we can use to share out describing your project for the general public. So there's an example here. This example is on the application when you download that Word document. Delete this and write your own. So you can delete this example and then you can write your own project summary. For the project purpose, include a summary that addresses the specific issue, problem, or need, the goals of the project, and why this project is important. In the project purpose section, don't go into a lot of detail about the how and any step-by-step procedures. There's going to be other sections where you can go into a little bit more detail. Beneficiaries and potential impact. So think about who is going to benefit from your project. That could be other farmers, it could be consumers, and it kind of really depends on what is the objective of your project. And then the proposal or the application is going to ask you how many beneficiaries will be impacted. This is just an estimate. It's not necessarily something that you will get punished or penalized for if you don't meet this. We just ask that you try to estimate and then explain how you got to that number in the external project support question. In the past, some people have used a percent. That's a little bit hard for reviewers to understand what that number is. So please just use a whole number. When you're thinking about who the beneficiaries are of your project, think about direct benefit and avoid counting all the indirect or tertiary beneficiaries. In the external project support, the question later in the application, you can expand on this number, and you can talk about what stakeholders support the project, those beneficiaries, how they will benefit and why they support this project. You can go into a little bit more detail to kind of flesh out that estimated single number that you're asked to input. And from the scoring criteria perspective, the combination of this with that external project support question is what makes up that 25-point part of the scoring criteria. In the application, building on previously funded specialty crop block grant, it is okay to have been previously awarded a specialty crop block grant and then come back and get funded a second time or multiple times. But in this particular question on the proposal, when you're filling out your application, just make sure you describe how you're going to build upon and differ from that previously funded specialty crop block grant, and make sure to summarize what the outcomes are or were of those previous projects, and what you're going to do to build upon the lessons learned and how you're going to incorporate those into your project for this proposal. Although it is allowable to, get multiple specialty crop block grants over the years, it's important that you describe how your project is going to become self-sustaining and not dependent on grant funding indefinitely. The point of the specialty crop block grant is to fund projects that aren't going to need grant funding forever. To continue, if you have other project funding that is specialty crop block grant or not, make sure that you're not requesting funding to double pay or duplicate efforts. If you have a proposal out that is simultaneous, or if you have some other project that's funded, we ask that you identify what that is and explain how it differs from those other projects. External project support, you're going to describe the specialty crop stakeholders who support the project and why. Those are going to be folks that aren't necessarily have active roles on implementing the project, but that are going to benefit from and support and value the success of your project and the fact that your project gets funded. Letters of support are going to help. They're going to help provide additional clarification and clout to this question. Letters of support can be from appropriate industries, partners, stakeholders. They could be, sometimes I've seen letters of support that are signed single letter signed by multiple farmers to kind of articulate and kind of capture that you have the buy-in from multiple farmers or for multiple partners in a single letter. Measurable outcomes. This is worth 30 points. So it's the question that has the most point value of all the different questions. And the priority will be given to projects that have the potential to provide outcomes that are measurable for the specialty crop industry and the public. You're going to have to pick which outcomes you're going to be measuring and using for your project. And for each of those outcomes, you're going to have to identify a number, but there's also going to be a section where you need to describe narratively how you are going to measure that. And you're going to describe what it is that you're going to be doing in your project for that. And so reviewers are going to be looking at that and saying, is this realistic and achievable, but based on everything that you've said you're going to do? And does this outcome, is this going to directly benefit producers or specialty crop processors? And then they're going to look at, you need to, in that narrative, talk about how you're going to monitor and measure those so that you can report on that and share those results back. So these are the 7 outcome options that you have. You can pick more than one. You can also just pick one. Picking more outcomes isn't necessarily going to make a stronger proposal. It really comes down to how all the pieces fit together. So that in itself is saying, a reviewer is not going to say, oh, this person clicked 6 out of the 7. Wow, they get a lot of points. That's not how it works. And as you can tell, there are a lot of different types of projects that are possible to be submitted and funded through the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. A project could be focused just on engaging consumers, or it could be engaged on food safety practices. That could be education, or there could be research focused projects. And please note that if there's certain project activities that you will have to select on the first that cover of the application. If you select marketing promotion or marketing and promotion as a project activity, then you need to use outcome 1. You need to select that outcome 1, which is increasing consumption and consumer purchasing of specialty crops. On the budget, eligible expenses include salary and fringe of the applicant and staff. It can include equipment rental. So the equipment has to be necessary for the implementation of the project, but rental of equipment is allowable. Supplies, each supply needs to be broken out in detail, and those supplies need to be tied to the outcomes and necessity of the project. Travel, each trip needs to be detailed, and the same applies. You need to justify why you're traveling to a particular destination and how that helps the project. Contractual fees and subcontractors are allowed. And then there is the other category. And for each of those, you're going to need to put in the budget numbers. But then underneath the budget, there's going to be a section where you have to write a budget narrative. This is a very important part of an application. This is where you're going to explain not just how you arrived at the total number, so the math, but it's also going to talk about who is doing this, who is responsible for it, why is it necessary to fund this, why is it necessary to have this be a part of your budget, because you need to be able to say, I need to go on this trip and we're going to accomplish this, and it ties back to a certain outcome or a certain dissemination effort if you're trying to share what you found. So you need to be able to talk about every single line item. If it's a person, how many hours are they putting in on the grant, and what are they going to be doing? What are their roles and responsibilities? If it's a subcontractor or contractual, what are they doing? And why is it necessary that they're included on the project? Just to note, it is possible that projects are not funded in full, that they're just partially funded. So ineligible expenses do run the risk of making the whole project ineligible if there's too many ineligible budget line items. But it's also possible that those ineligible expenses or not feasible expenses can get cut from your proposal. So what are those ineligible expenses that should not be included in your budget? Capital expenses. That means repairs, renovations, as well as any kind of equipment, building, construction, anything that's related to capital assets. Meals. Meals mainly includes having events or workshops or meetings, and this grant cannot pay for food at those events. Equipment, equipment under $5,000 is allowable, and that's a per unit cost. Equipment with a per unit cost over $5,000 is not eligible for to be funded by this grant program. And then you cannot use any grant funding to do lobbying or fundraising, and you cannot supplant. So if someone is already funded from a different grant, you cannot pay them with this grant a second time. And if you are generating revenue through some kind of event, there's certain restrictions on those as well. And more information, I can provide more information on that if that is relevant to you. I've said this a few times already. Please, if your project is mainly benefiting one entity, it will most likely not be competitive enough to be funded. Make sure that goals and your outcomes and budgets all align until one succinct project narrative. For this grant program, no match is required. So you put together your budget, and the entire budget is what you're requesting funding for. Indirect costs. Indirect costs are things that might pay for administration oversight or utilities. There's oftentimes grants will cover indirect costs, but for the specialty crop block grant, indirect costs are not allowable to be requested. And please make sure that all your expenses are eligible. If you have any specific questions about that, please email me. I would be happy to help you figure that out. And note that sometimes projects can be partially funded. When you're putting together your application, here's some things to note. Please don't change the application format. Please just answer the question and write about the things that the specialty crop block grant wants to fund, and don't provide any additional information. Try to make sure that you're staying on topic for the specialty crop block grant and the goals and the objectives of that specialty crop block grant program. And if your project goals do not align with what the grant program is trying to achieve, and there's not synergy there, then this grant program may not be a good fit, or maybe your project needs to be tweaked in some kind of way so that you can align. Please use the budget that's provided. This is just a piece of advice. Don't wait to the last minute. And check grammar and spelling. And then in general, I always like to have someone read through my application or proposal that knows nothing about my project. And if they understand it and they can, communicate back to me what it is that I want them to understand, then you know that you've done a pretty good job. In general, when it comes to the project narrative, oftentimes putting down all your thoughts on the paper is the first step, and then going back and trying to clean that up and make it as to the point and succinct as possible so that it is extremely clear. And then when it comes to the budget narrative, when you want to try to explain and justify each budget line item, I tend to think that more detail is usually better. So when it comes to the project narrative, sometimes less is more. And when it comes to the budget narrative, sometimes more is more. But mainly, when you're writing that proposal, remember, you want your proposal to stand out. Make sure that you have a strong need or opportunity that you're trying to accomplish, and try to make sure that your project is going to capture the imagination. And so as you're explaining what you're planning on doing, the reviewers need to be able to imagine what it is that they're going to do. And if at any point they're asking themselves, what do they mean? Or I don't understand what exactly they're trying to do here. And those are all going to be points that probably are going to be deducted from your project. And typically this grant program, like most grant programs, are competitive. So trying to make yourself as clear as possible is usually going to be things in strategy to strengthen your grant proposal. Also, make sure that even if your business or operation deals with non-specialty crops, do not reference them in your application and project, and make sure that your project focuses just on specialty crops and doesn't benefit other non-specialty crops. So that is my presentation so far, and I've seen a lot of things come in on the chat.
Great, yes, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for everyone that has put questions in the chat. We'll go through these questions. Feel free to unmute as well and ask questions if you have them. So the first question I had was, I have a question about eligibility of mushrooms and microgreens.
Mushrooms and microgreens are both eligible as specialty crops.
Perfect.
So,
and did you have any further questions about those two, or just if they were eligible? Okay, perfect. I did in the chat, I did put the links to the USDA website for eligibility requirements. So you can also find those there. Let's see the next questions. I did also, I put the link to the DATCP Specialty Crop Block Grant page. There you'll find all the application materials like Andrew mentioned, but at the very bottom of that page, you'll see our past press releases that award or announced our past awardees. So you can find those there. That information would be helpful to you. Yes, we will post the recording of the Zoom and the slide deck to the website after. Andrew, I would assume we'd also do a .gov delivery to everyone that is registered for the webinar. So it will also come to your inbox.
Yeah, I'll email this again.
Yep, so we'll include a copy of the slides and the video for both. The next question, if a single organization represents the interest of multiple growers, including prospective growers, would that org be excluded as a single entity?
No. So, I mean, there's only going to be a single applicant. An applicant is just an applicant. And a lot of times you're going to have a single researcher doing some research, but the findings are going to benefit a lot of farmers. It could be that a single farmer is going to be working on developing new product, or testing out a market, or doing something that is related to improving production or food safety, all the things that are eligible. That single farm or that business might be doing the work, but it needs to have built into the work plan some way that they're going to benefit other growers, usually through the sharing of lessons learned, and the findings. It could also be that you're going to come up with a resource. It could be a handout. It could be some kind of deliverable. So sometimes you can share information learned. That's going to be things to avoid. Maybe I tried this and it was a horrible idea, or I tried this and it was a great idea. That's information that you're sharing with people. And it could be something that is a little bit more tangible, something that they could pick up and have, whether that's like a handout or something like that. There's a lot of different ways that others will benefit. And so if you, the applicant, are a single organization and you represent multiple growers, well, then it's even easier for you to talk about how you're going to be not just benefiting yourself. But I think in every situation, you should have some way that you're going to be sharing your findings, even if you, the applicant, are an organization that represents multiple growers. You should think beyond those multiple growers. Anyhow, I think that's going to be just a stronger proposal in general.
Great, thank you, Andrew. The next question in the chat is, as a grower, packer, and distributor, how do I count the number of consumers that may benefit from the project?
I don't think there's a right answer for that question. And there's not like a specific number. I think there's a lot of different ways to, estimate what that number is going to be. And it really depends on what the focus of the project is going to be. So like, is the project going to help you get more product to your market? Well, how many, consumers are going to be there? If your project is going to like help bring in more growers to be able to supply, then, how many new growers do you estimate? If there's kind of other stakeholders like along the way, I think you can summarize those too. And then, the form as it's designed is just asking for a number. So you're just gonna have to come up with that number. But then I think later in the grant proposal, you can talk about who all supports this, and that could be those growers or those marketplaces. It could be other stakeholders somewhere along the way. And how, like, why do they support the project, or maybe how do they benefit by this?
Great, thank you, Andrew. The next question is, I think I read somewhere a grant administrator not associated with not an associated business employee would need an UEI number. Is this correct?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but every applicant will need a UEI. Roberta, if you still have question, you can, chat or talk.
Okay.
Or whatever.
Well, I guess what I was saying, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I'm representing a bunch of businesses and I have a specialty crop of my own and collaborate with other businesses. But, okay, so I would be the administrator of the grant. I guess I thought I read somewhere that.
Yeah, I think I understand.
Okay.
If you're the applicant, you're going to put your name.
Yeah.
You're going to be the person that's going to be responsible for submitting reports. You're going to get the payments when you submit a grant reimbursement. You have to have the cash to have the expense, and then you get reimbursed for that. But you're going to be the main point of contact.
Yeah.
You need a UEI. So whoever the applicant is needs a UEI. And then if other people are going to get paid through the grant, through contractual agreements or subawards or partners, whatever, right?
Yeah.
they don't need a UEI. They just have to work with you if you're the lead applicant
Right.
or whoever that lead applicant is.
Okay, one other little part to that question is so you get the UAI based on your DUNS number, blah, blah, blah. I have a DUNS number, but I never did the financial aspect of it. Is that necessary for qualify?
I don't know specifically. I think if you had a DUNS number, I think the generation of the UAI was automatic, but I might be wrong on that in every case.
Yeah.
And I don't know about the different aspects of
Yeah.
that. So if I understand you correctly, I know that you can have different levels, like for the UEI now, and I think that was
Oh.
true for the DUNS number. And
Okay.
it meant like you could receive money, but you maybe if you didn't do the full registration, then you couldn't actually apply for a federal grant.
Okay.
There's stuff like that, and maybe that's what you're talking about. But I
I don't
think
know, I
in
guess
this,
I'd find out.
okay. Well, I'd be happy to help you with that if you run into any kind of like UEI problems. But really for this, because it's kind of administered through the state, you don't have to apply through grants.gov, and some of it's not as like stringent as applying for a federal grant through a federal agency. So you just need to list that UEI, and then I think that there's a little bit more flexibility there. So I assume if you had a DUNS number, then you should have a UEI, and if you got a UEI, you're good no matter what kind it is. But you would maybe have to dig in on that a little bit.
Okay, well, that's very helpful. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. The next question is, does starting a city farmers market qualify?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like there's the market, the first project activity, marketing promotion, and it's about engaging consumers and increasing sales. And when you're putting together proposals, think about return on investment and what those sales are going to be. Those are going to be metrics. You are going to have farmers that are going to benefit from this. You're going to have consumers that are going to benefit from this. I think the one tricky thing that you want to think about is I've never seen a farmer's market that excludes, like meat and eggs and stuff, and cheese, So just think a little bit about how you're going to think, frame that, and what the goal is. One of the things that I had said earlier was, has this been done before? Starting a farmer's market, there's a lot of farmers markets. It's not like you're going to come up with something new and innovative if you're just coming up with the farmer's market. So you need to think about how what you're doing is different, or what's the need. Why do you need specialty crop block funds to start a farmer's market wherever you're at? Is it based on the location, the people that are there? What's going on? So you need to come up with a story that justifies it. You need to connect with the reviewers. You need to make sure that you're accomplishing the specialty crop block grant goals. But having a farmer's market in itself isn't like going to disqualify you from applying for the program. I just think that you might have some work to try to think about how you're going to make yourself stand apart from anybody else who started a farmer's market without grant funding.
Great, thank you. Does a farm LLC for-profit qualify?
Yeah, that doesn't matter. For-profit can apply. Yeah, it qualifies.
Perfect. What's the rate of successful proposals historically?
The number of proposals varies from year to year, so that number is going to go up and down. And off the top of my head, I'm trying to think.
I would say last year's was very high. It was probably 75, 80%.
Yeah, and some years I would say maybe it's closer to 50%. So we might fund 10 to 12 or 15. I can't remember exactly, but number of proposals, but we may get 30 So you're looking at some years where it may be 30% are funded, and it really kind of depends on how they're ranked, the score that everyone gets, and if the proposals that score well happen to be larger proposals closer to that $100,000 mark, or if they end up being a little lower. I think on average, I don't know how current the stat is, but I saw for previous years, the average funding project was closer to like the $50,000 range. And that's not necessarily because we're cutting funding from every project, but yeah, there's some people just don't request for the full amount. It varies so much. That's a little hard to summarize. I don't have that data right off the top of my head.
Great, thank you. The next question is, are Christmas trees eligible? Which I think they are.
They are.
Okay,
Yep.
correct. Let's see. Has hemp officially been identified as a specialty crop?
Not yet. There's been a lot of discussion about it, and I think there's like, people that are out there that are pushing for that, but currently it's still ineligible, and that's because it's listed as a fiber crop, for hemp fiber, even though there's like hemp berries and things like that, which is a food.
Next question. I know we have a bunch in here, so the possible expense, membership to a specialty crop organization, is that eligible?
I'm not sure. I think that might be a little hard to justify off the top of my head.
Okay.
I can
there's
look
some
that
que-
up and then send that out with the email to everybody.
Perfect, thank you. There was a question about, what the purpose of a UEI is.
Yeah.
So if you just want to maybe give the basics on that one.
Yep. So Anne has it right. Unique entity identifier. It is it's managed through the federal government. SAM is an acronym. It stands for System Award Management. If you're going to apply for a federal grant through a federal agency, which this is not the case, it's federal funding, but it's through the state. You would need to usually apply through grants.gov, and just to kind of like be put into the system and to like, have access to even apply at all, you're gonna need to, basically register yourself. So it's just like identifying who you are, so that there's like you have an identity. And so the state just uses that to, that we have a record of who you are. And, I said this before, but each state has its own specialty crop block grant program, and states have various amounts of funding, depending on some various algorithms. And each state goes through its own call for proposals, review process. They review them, and then they submit their recommendations to the USDA specialty crop block grant team, who then reviews and approves. So this is a federal program. It just happens to be administered at the state. And so the federal government, the USDA, is beholden to like Congress and Farm Bill. And so they want to know who they're funding. So when you submit your reports, when you get funded, if you get funded, those reports go to the USDA, and some of that information, justifies funding the specialty crop block grant at all, like in the Farm Bill and things like that. So you have to do that because this is a federal program.
Andrew, the next question is, if my application is not chosen, can I reapply a similar proposal for the next year? Yes, you're able to apply. We normally provide feedback with our scores when they come back to you to help improve your application. Is grant money taxable? e.g., not sure what that is. Is it
Example
income?
account.
Oh,
Yeah, you need to report it.
okay. Is something like a 1099-G issued to the grant recipient?
I know, I think so. So if you get accepted, you're gonna have to fill out a W-9 and be put into DATCP's financial, system so that you can get issued payment. And I believe there'll be tax stuff that's sent to you that's handled by finance, not our division.
Great, thank you. Where would I find that feedback on last year's application that was denied? If you're talking about a specific application, you can send Andrew or I an email and we can help locate it. If that's the case, but otherwise we don't just share, feedback on everyone's grant. We just share it with the applicant. So, so income reporting is required. Apparently money that gets distributed to another entity on the grant is an expense that can be deducted.
I'm not sure about that. That sounds like your own, you need to talk to whoever prepares your taxes. But
Yeah, my question was as administrator, okay, applying for multiple entities. I get the 1099 or whatever that says, hey, you got this money, but I didn't actually use all this money for myself. So it would be an accountant question is what you're saying then.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, so if you're acting more as a pass-through,
Yeah.
So it looks like that is all of the questions in the chat. I don't know if anyone wants to unmute. We have just a few minutes left. If you want to unmute and ask questions.
I would ask a question, if you can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, great, Jean Northey. I was curious if you have any consideration with basically side health issues of growing small specialty crops. Like if you were trying to concoct, I guess might be a word, soil amendments, foliar sprays, maybe some seed treatments that are that would be applicable to other farmers. And some of them would be, I tried to do some things with sugar beets and molasses where you kind of bump start a process before it reaches the soil level. Is that, would you fold that into this kind of grant, or would I totally look somewhere else?
you can, if it improves the production of specialty crops, that is, that's your eligible expenses.
Would you focus on just one particular applicant? Like I've been working with nettle as a fiber crop, so I understand that's probably not the stinging nettle. And it has other applications for tea and soil health. And so would you just focus on, say, example, just that alone or something else?
What do you mean that alone? Like you're talking about multiple crops?
No, I meant multiple amendments, like if you're trying to grow your fungi in your soil and are doing some other components to make, like some nurseries are kind of specializing in things that are like that. And I just been dabbling on a garden level with that. But so I guess I just meant like, would you just best off picking one particular crop to use? I was looking at growing sugar beets to do that soil amendment as well. So I guess those are two examples.
Okay. Sugar beets are actually considered a field crop and not a specialty crop. And as far as like what kind of amendments or strategies that you're gonna try to investigate, for this or research for this grant proposal, that's kind of up to you, and that's like your own personal strategy. I think it really comes down to if you start throwing everything in the kitchen sink at the reviewers and say, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. One, is that really feasible? You know, make sure that you line out like what you're gonna do in your work plan and timeline and how you're gonna do it, and you have the right kind of staff and the right kind of space and the right kind of like setup. And then also, it's remember, you're gonna ask someone who may not know anything about this subject matter to like, you have to kind of like maybe treat the reviewers like they don't know what you're talking about. And they may do, but if they don't, then you got to make sure that you're understood. And so you're going to have to explain a project and explain all these different things. So if they can get lumped together in the right kind of way, summarized or grouped, and then you can say, we're going to address this production for this crop or this types of crops. And we're going to try these 4 different strategies.
Oh, okay.
Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I can visualize that. I can understand that. But if you're going to say, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and then you get down here and you're like, okay, I'm going to pay this person to do that, and this person to do that. And if the reviewer's like, wait, what are you talking about? And they can't follow you, you know, follow your words the way you've described it, then I think it's just going to be, I think that's going to be unclear and hard to understand. And that's just going to make the proposal not, I think that's going to hurt the proposal score.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Good effort. Thank you so much.
Any other questions for anybody else that would like to unmute and ask them? Okay, seeing none, we are almost at 1 o'clock exactly. Thank you all for joining us. I did put our emails in the chat, so feel free to reach out with any questions that you may have. We will, like I said, post the recording and the slideshow, and as well as email that out to everyone that was registered for the webinar. So thank you very much, and have a great day.